Hi guys, welcome to class. Today we're going to be looking at mental imagery and visualization. This is a practice that I think that we probably have more experience with than we may have initially imagined. Uh, for our college age group population, the most common spot for this is, and if you have a background in athletics or in performance of any kind, athletics has adopted visualization a little bit more than perhaps some of the performing arts, but there's definitely the inclusion of visualization into the performing arts as well. But even if you're not in either of those situations, I think it's probably pretty likely that you have used visualization. It may not have been intentional, and it may not have been in large scope or with any consistency, but I imagine that you've actually used it. And so let's take a look at how that might have happened and how you might choose to continue to use it with intentionality now for a number of different purposes that may fit your particular needs. Albert Einstein said that imagination is more powerful than knowledge. And it's that imagination that we're really trying to tap into, the power of your mind and its ability to create scenarios. Now, we know that you and I both have a massive ability to be able to create scenarios that aren't necessarily positive. We have a great tendency and a great ability to catastrophize or to imagine a future that's going to go in the worst case scenario. So that's a type of visualization and a type you've probably experienced. So you can see some of the power of visualization that when you have imagined a worst case scenario for what might be taking place in an upcoming event, the reality of that is that you're expressing yourself and demonstrating some pretty significant forms of anxiety in which you were thinking about a future that we haven't experienced, that may not actually take place in that fashion, but just by imagining it, we are changing the way we feel, we're changing the way our body is reacting, we're experiencing stress, we're experiencing anxiety because of our imagination. We're hoping then that, or I'm hoping then that that brings a sense of power to you. If your imagination can create that kind of negative experience for you, that we also have the ability to create a positive experience for you. So ideally, as we continue to grow in our own skill and our own control of visualization or mental imagery, then we can move ourselves from states where we feel stressed into states where we don't feel stressed, as opposed to using that in the opposite way, which is one way that I think that probably we have all done. So I'm really hopeful that you will see some real validity and some power and some opportunity in visualization or in mental imagery. We're going to talk about a couple of different terms here. We need to make a distinction between visualization and mental imagery, both of which are essentially using some form of imagery and working on mental training. We're also going to add in another term of guided mental imagery. So I want to make some small distinctions between those so that you have an understanding as you continue or as you return to your reading, or as you hear me using some of those terms here in the lecture, that there's a better understanding of how they have a form of differentiation. The first one I'm going to hit on here, you can see up here at the top, the slide that I picked is going to look really similar. The one I picked up here at the top is, for the first term we're going to look at, is mental imagery. So that's just where we're going to be using the imagination to observe from a first-person point of view. So not from an outsider looking at a performance, but from a first-person point of view, the images that your own unconscious mind can create with the purpose of trying to induce either relaxation or to assist and encourage behavior change or to just heal and restore the body. The distinction that visualization then brings is this is a self-directed exercise where we are using mental imagery, but we're really intentionally creating images of success. I think of visualization more like you're telling a story and you're watching, or telling a movie would probably be a better way, that you are creating a movie and you are the one who has written the script and is directing it, so that you are in control of what happens, what you see, and we use those movies of what we are projecting or predicting for our future, not in a negative way, like we talked about catastrophizing, but in a positive way, to really try and create stories for ourselves of success, of healing, or of just generally getting better. Maybe it's behavior change of some kind, and we just want to really approach with confidence this behavior change that we're working on. The last of the three that I said I want to make some distinction around was guided mental imagery. So this is one in which you're actually guided through a series of suggestions. So there's somebody who is creating some kind of structure for what you are then filling in. So the analogy I might use here would be if you think of a coloring book. In a coloring book, you get sort of a general outline, but you get to color it in the way that you want, and you get to fill it in the way that you want. So the guided, the therapist or the instructor or the counselor, or whoever it is, the coach, whoever it is that's working with you, I'm going to use a relaxation version since that's what the illustration in the slide brings to my mind anyway. The coach may be saying, okay, I want you to picture yourself on a beach. And for some people, their beach may end up looking like the illustration that you see here. For others, that may end up looking like a tropical beach. For others, it may end up looking like a beach on a lake or a river instead of a lake, or whatever it may be. So they give some structure, but you are filling in the pieces, and they continue to give you encouragement to refine and develop and sort of exist or move within that space. So this is often used more for relaxation and restoration, because those are universal experiences or universal goals, whereas your own sporting performance, your healing, some of those other behavior change things can be so uniquely dependent upon your experience and your skill sets and things, that a general guideline oftentimes is not as successful as if you just generate that yourself, if you go through a visualization process. So does it work? Is there any chance that it could even possibly work? We do have a lot of research around mental imagery, and there's a number of different conditions or populations that have been investigated to see whether it will work in those circumstances. In large part, we actually have an area of study that helps to deal in part with this. It also deals with much broader uses, or it is a much broader field than simply looking at mental imagery, is what I mean to be saying. That field is called psychoneuroimmunology. So you can see from the name, psych here as a root word is going to have to deal with the mind and what you're thinking. The neuro here is going to have to deal with the nervous system, of which your brain and your spinal cord can constitute the central nervous system. So we're looking at a study of both how you think and how your brain works, and how they impact the immune system. The immuno here is referring to the immune system, and then ology is just the study of. So the study of what you think and how your brain and central nervous system function, how do the interaction of those things influence your immune system. So mental imagery, where we're creating pictures, scenarios, movies, etc., certainly can have an influence on the way that our body functions. So you see in the list here a number of different areas that have some of the strongest research showing a positive impact of mental imagery. Immune function being one of those primary ones. We can use our own imagination or our own visualizations to really help improve our healing process. Cancer is one of the areas where this is been utilized for that particular condition with more frequency, but it's not limited to that. Even if you're experiencing injuries on the athletic field, or you're experiencing injuries that are more common in nature, but not as long-term as cancer, you can still see see improvements within the healing process if we're consistently and effectively using mental imagery. We also can use it for markers that are going to indicate that we are experiencing stress reduction. So things like our decreases in resting blood pressure and increases in other markers that identify that a person's moving into a relaxed state, like heart rate. We also utilize, I mentioned earlier, that probably one of the primary areas that our age group, or your age group, has experience with visualization or mental imagery is within sport performance. And there's definitely a lot of research showing that when athletes are trained on how to use visualization and they consistently practice using visualization, that it indeed can be very effective in helping improve sport performance. It's pretty interesting that just imagining or creating that movie, creating that scenario in your own mind, actually activates the same brain areas as if you were living that experience or if you were going through that motion. So for those of you that are familiar with the popular culture term of like muscle memory, this is one of those examples of how it is that we can utilize visualization to actually be more successful and less anxious or less stressed, as if we've gone through this experience before, when we are doing a concert, or when you are doing a play or a performance or an athletic event of some kind. That it's, if you are, the more and more effective you are at visualizing the event, the more and more that mimics you actually having experienced that event. And with you creating the story, as you create a very successful, very dominant performance within that experience that you're imagining, then you get to the real life experience. It's as if you've lived it. It's as if you're relying on past experience to some extent, and you have the confidence that that past experiences bring, because you're going to hopefully be visualizing more than a single time. Now, how do we use visualization to improve whichever of the different conditions or different areas that we want to see success in? I think it can be really helpful to look at some of visualization or mental imagery. For some of us can feel very, what's a good word for it? I want to say fluffy, but I want to have a better vocabulary to be able to express that this doesn't feel like a hard science, or doesn't feel like necessarily something that's going to be all that effective. That could be a perspective that you share in part or in whole. I think the easiest way for me to recognize the power of it is to remember those times when I have catastrophized and I have imagined a future in a worst case scenario, and the way that it made me feel, and how quickly I immediately was switched from whatever was my preceding thoughts into this real sense of anxiety or dread, and that I know that it changed me, and it was just based off of my thoughts, because nothing, that future hadn't happened, and most of the time the future didn't play out in the way that the incredibly negative ways that I thought it was going to. So for me, that connection point is really validating. Hopefully the way that I've explained it and your own past experiences help to create some validation connection for you as well. But if you're more of a, I really prefer to see some of the scientific sort of information around these different relaxation techniques, I think the way that Patricia Norris approached it might be really helpful. So we talked about biofeedback a couple of days ago, or a couple of classes ago. So we're familiar with what biofeedback is. Dr. Norris was utilizing biofeedback markers and then experimenting with guided meditation, with visualization, and trying to work with her research subjects to identify what are the parameters that have the biggest influence on the body's physiology as we look at measuring that and giving some biofeedback so they can see the results of that instantaneously as they are attempting these multiple variations on how guided meditation or visualization was led or promoted. Okay, so that may be a little longer explanation than needed, but here are some of the things that she said. If you really want to be more and more effective with your visualization, these are things that are more helpful in that. First, that it's idiosyncratic in nature, meaning just that you are generating it. That doesn't mean it can't be a guided meditation and still be very effective, because you're still generating, you're still coloring it in, you're still generating the scene. But shouldn't be this shouldn't be a scenario where if you as a coach, if you're trying to lead this, you're not walking them through every single aspect of the performance or every single aspect of the movement. You're going to highlight the basic scenarios, but regardless of what format you're using, we want to be generating that image as much as we possibly can as the person who is experiencing it, because we want our own central nervous system to ingrain this or to contain these specific events or memories as if they were something that we have been through before. The next one you see there, egosyntonic in nature, means that what you're doing and what you're visualizing needs to align with your values. If you are visualizing something that just within the athletic performance or within whatever it may be, I'm going to use an athletic performance one here as an example. If you're going through a meditation or a visualization rather, and you're experiencing, like, I make this amazing, I'm going to pretend I'm in a football. So I'm a receiver. I make this amazing catch on the sideline. Safety comes over, or the defense comes over, and one of the players knocks me, and my foot goes partly out of bounds, and I can see that my foot, like, I just barely stepped out of bounds, but I just barely stepped out of bounds. I recover my balance enough that I get my next footfall is completely inbounds, and I make the rest of the run down to the touchdown. If that is the visualization that you are creating, but you just are, that you aren't being honest, like that many players, they think winning is, or in many cases, players think that winning is the most important thing. So if the ref didn't call it, then it didn't happen, is one perspective. For other players, they know I'm really trying to play to grow my own character, and play is an amazing and the sport is an amazing thing that I really love, but part of what I'm doing here is working on character. So if I stepped out of bounds, even if it's the smallest amount, regardless of whether the ref saw it or called it or not, that's out of bounds. So if what you're imagining isn't aligning with your values, then it just doesn't stick. Your mind and your emotions get in conflict, and then the value of the visualization is incredibly lost, because there's turmoil instead of cohesiveness. We really want to have positive connotations. Negative imagery does increase negative thoughts. So that if you think about that catastrophization, like, those are real experiences, and we live and feel those experiences, that imagining the worst case scenario. So make sure that you're controlling your own thoughts as you go into a visualization or a mental imagery scenario, that if you're starting to experience some negative imagery, you're starting to create a scene or a movie or whatever, however you would describe that isn't fully positive. We want to move that back into being positive images. We want to imagine best case scenarios. We want to imagine us being really successful. We want to imagine us being really happy. We want to imagine us being really relaxed. We want to imagine us being fully healed. The next one that you see on there is that we want to increase the somatic feeling, the kinesthetic feeling. We want to do our best, and this takes practice. Like, remember, every single one of these relaxation techniques just takes lots of practice. So you'll probably start out with trying to create a visual sense and try to just get better and better control of and more detail into what your visualization looks like. So you're likely to start off with pretty much exclusively visual, but as you gain skill and as you gain ability in this to be more and more effective, you want to continue to include more and more of your senses. So work to include the way it feels to be going through that motion, to be going through that activity. And that the kinesthetic means not the way it feels from an emotional standpoint, but the way that it feels from a physical standpoint. So what does it feel like if I am swinging in baseball with my shoulders tight and create all that power in my upper torso as the bat is swinging, and there's all that fluidity and all that speed, and then the crack of the shock of the ball and the bat making perfect contact, and then what do all of those sensations actually feel like? What does your body feel like as I shift my weight from my back foot into my front foot? Or whatever the scenario or situation that you're visualizing, we're going to work to try and feel that from a kinesthetic standpoint. Other areas that we want to be thoughtful about, remember, we can use visualization in a whole lot of different ways and in very positive results. So in this particular recommendation where she says that things should be anatomically correct and accurate, what we're really talking about certainly will be that kinesthetic feel. So if you are imagining yourself in a sporting performance, then imagining your body moving through those motions and what it feels like as you move through those motions is really important. But from a broader sense, or from a different perspective, if we're thinking about using this to be healing, then we want to be visualizing the actual body area that's affected. We want to use as much knowledge as we have about our own anatomy and physiology and how those are being positively reinforced and activated to increase our healing. This again is a skill. So constancy and dialogue is the next main point that she recommends. That just means that we really need to be consistent with it, and we really need to be doing it frequently. This is not something that is simple, and it's not something that's easy to be able to control and to be able to be the most effective at it that we can be from a positive standpoint. I think that the catastrophizing seems like it is really easy, and for some of us it happens way more frequently than we want it to. But from a positive standpoint, it's going to take practice. Now, the last two that you see here, there's a blueprint aspect, and this is coming back to that anatomically correct in nature. From the blueprint aspect, if you are visualizing an activity, you want to imagine that taking place from the very beginning to the full completion of that activity. So for myself, free throw and basketball is a common one that I practiced a lot. That's going to mean from the point that for me, the point that the ref tosses the ball to me, I'm standing at the line, I make sure I get my feet set, and I'm going to move through and visualize the entirety of that motion all the way until I make a perfect shot that doesn't even touch the rim. The other that is listed there is again coming back to that anatomically correct and accurate in nature, but is now more towards a healing process. If you are working and utilizing visualization as part of the healing process, don't pretend that it is exclusive. Don't pretend that don't imagine that you are just healed internally by the own activation of your body systems. If you are going through a medical treatment, if there is medications, or if there are shots, or if there are surgeries, or if there are rehabilitation, or whatever it may be, whatever the treatment that you are also utilizing, include that in the imagery. Use that because that is a reality of the life that you're living. That also needs to be included within your vision of how you're improving your healing. So there's a couple of primary ways that we use visualization. The first, and one that probably jumped to mind first to you, the first in my order, and the one that I imagine jumped to mind first for you, unless you have done a lot of visualization as an athlete or a performer of some kind, is around relaxation. So that is the visualization of a really tranquil nature scene, whether it's some kind of mountainous or beach type scene. Those are often, we have practiced when we did a meditation, we did a guided visualization actually, where we were walking through a field and we came to a tree. Another important area where visualization and mental imagery can be really impactful is around behavior changes. Smoking cessation has been studied in this area, and visualization or guided meditations have been helpful for individuals working towards stopping smoking. Weight management, changes in how active you are. There are all kinds of different behavioral changes that you may be interested in initiating, whether it's just confidence in speaking out in public spaces, or whether it is stopping procrastination, or instead of scrolling on your phone, doing whatever it may be. There's a number of different ways that we oftentimes want to see self-improvement for ourselves, and visualizing and imagining the scenarios that we're presented in. And instead of engaging in the negative behavior that we want to avoid or we want to change, we visualize how we would act and what it would feel like to act in those ways, and what we would do and say and etc. That they can be very, very helpful in increasing the likelihood of you successfully navigating that behavioral change and making you into the better version of yourself that you're desiring. Sport performance definitely is one that I have hit on a number of times within this lecture. It is absolutely an area where visualization is proven to be effective. And it's doesn't matter what the nature of that sporting performance is, whether it's a team sport, an individual sport. Visualization can be very, very helpful for your athletic performances, or performances of any kind, I think would be even better way to say that. And then we've also hit on a couple of times the idea that, or not the idea, but this other category or way in which visualization is really helpful, and that's within healing. So it can be simple muscle bone issues that you may be facing, that where healing can be effective. It can also be more significant chronic diseases. We did not cover art therapy in lecture, and won't be covering art therapy in lecture this semester. It is included in your textbook. But this is an illustration from a young boy who was asked to show or to draw. So they were utilizing art therapy, but to show or to draw how he was visualizing, or what he was imagining when he was being asked to go through visualization activities, how his body was responding to cancer. So for him, he has these positive parts of his body that are coming along and just eating away at the cancer, and that he was getting better and better and better. So visualization can be utilized in a number of different mechanisms, as art therapy can also be very, very helpful in some of those, in a number of different ways as well. So hopefully I've sold you, like you're ready, you're interested in trying out some visualization or some mental imagery. You can see some benefit, and you can recognize that while the first try may not give you the most profound results, just as like with every single one of our relaxation techniques, this may be one of the ones that you want to be experimenting with, though. So you have that lab coming up in about a week, a little over a week, where you've been responsible for practicing out of class some of relaxation techniques. Whatever time you have left today for our class, or at any point, you may be choosing to utilize mental imagery. So how to do that? First, just make sure you're in a comfortable position. I would also include within that, not only that you're physically comfortable, but that you feel like you're in a space where you are emotionally comfortable as well. So for most of us, I believe that is more likely to be someplace that's sort of quiet, that is, there aren't a lot of other people around. As you're practicing something that's new to you, I think that we feel more comfortable. I feel more comfortable anyway. Maybe I'll just project myself into the situation. I would feel more comfortable practicing any skill that was brand new to me in a space that was private. So find a comfortable spot, both comfortable physically and emotionally. You need to be approaching this with a very positive attitude, with a proactive attitude, with the idea that this can really be helpful for you. Your concentration and your ability to generate and create the scene or the movie or the images is really, really important. We want to be working as much as we can to avoid being distracted by other things. So that's another reason I think a quiet and peaceful spot is important to you. And then we're going to be working on that visualization, trying to bring that image to life, or trying to bring that image to mind. We've practiced in the past a couple of times already diaphragmatic breathing, and often this is really recommended, something that I would suggest might be very, very helpful to be including within this experiment for you. And those positive affirmations are going to help towards that attitude aspect, I believe, as well. So I don't think that if visualization is something that is new to you and you're just experimenting with, that you're likely to be feeling success trying to include all of these different areas. But as you continue to grow in your skill set, the way that you can also grow or make the time that you spend in visualization grow in its effectiveness is to continue to involve as many of the different senses as you possibly can. If you're experimenting with this, my suggestion is for now just to do as much as you can in that visual realm. But if you are already experienced, or as you continue to grow in that skill, then adding in your other senses, from the way things feel, the way things sound, the smells that you're experiencing in that environment, etc. The more you can make this mimic a real life lived experience, the more carryover it has into giving more and more positive benefits. So lastly, we can sort of look at mental imagery in two different ways. We can take an internal perspective or an external perspective. So an internal perspective just means that you are going to be seeing the scene as if it's through your own living eyes. And you're going to be experiencing the moment from your own first person perspective. Everything that you see is going to be from your own living eyes, or at least from that perspective. And that's the best way for that kinesthetic information to be lived or to be experienced, because it matches with that perspective of this is what I'm seeing. And now as I go through that swing, I think is the example that we gave before, and I can feel the tension in my shoulders as I preload it, and now the explosiveness as I activate those muscles. And then I get to the swing phase where the bat seems to be smoothly moving with such speed through the air. And I feel that tension in my back, and I feel that shift from moving from my back leg towards my front leg, and I can feel the rotation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need me to describe a swing of a bat to you, but if you are looking at it from the first person perspective, that internal perspective, it's much easier to include that kinesthetic information. So that's probably where I would encourage you to be starting. It's also effective. One's not better than the other necessarily, other than I think you get a lot better capacity to involve that kinesthetic information if you're looking from an internal perspective. An external perspective just means that you're seeing it as if you're watching a movie, not that you're in the movie. So you're watching from outside your body, you're watching from outside yourself, like as if you're a spectator. And imagery from both perspectives has been proven to be effective. So use whichever is more comfortable for you. Remember, the improvement is going to begin with I. So you just got to get started. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be massive, but skill is developed with practice. So if you are looking for relaxation and you are looking towards utilizing mental imagery, I think sometimes some of the best places to start are just from a peaceful perspective and clearing your mind as much as you possibly can. And that is it for today. I hope that you have a great rest of the day. Thank you for being here with me.